Good morning, everybody. This is a live emergency briefing as Tropical Storm Ida is nearing hurricane strength so far this morning. And in fact, I think it's already at hurricane strength already. Just waiting verification from the National Hurricane Center to interpret that Hurricane Hunter reconnaissance aircraft data. But you can definitely see on satellite imagery, this is from tropicaltidbits.com. Look at those transverse bands with this convective explosion on approach to the Isle of Youth there, western Cuba, where hurricane warnings are in effect. Right now, the minimum pressure is down to about 995 millibars, but it looks like hurricane reconnaissance aircraft has shown minimum pressure extrapolated down to the sea surface, even lower than that. Looks like about 992, 993 millibars with flight level winds consistent with a Category 1 hurricane. And the National Hurricane Center now has Ida being a major hurricane, a Category 3 storm there on approach to south central or southeastern Louisiana. You can see the cone basically envelops the entire state of Louisiana on the south side there of that track. And here is the latest hurricane recon data. The red line there is the mean sea level pressure, and that shows that with a couple of passes, it does look like that mean sea level pressure is down to a little bit lower than that 995 millibar minimum pressure so far, which shows that it does continue to intensify. Definitely consistent on satellite. You can certainly see that intensification, and it does look like the models have underdone the rate of intensification here in the northwestern Caribbean Sea on approach to western Cuba. So this thing is definitely going to be a hurricane when it crosses over the western tip of Cuba, which should mean that it'll be a little bit further east, and that the eastern half of the GFS ensemble here from the 6Z model run should be the most likely scenario to happen, which would bring it in over southeastern Louisiana, maybe out near the Grand Isle area for potential landfall. Devastating storm surge, probably a 10 to 15 foot type storm surge, especially if this ramps up to a Category 4 hurricane or even stronger than that. That wall of water will definitely head right up the Mississippi River. But these are the latest GFS ensembles. And interestingly, the European model still has some of these Western members showing landfall in northeastern Texas, still potentially in play. Really anywhere from the central Texas coast all the way through the Florida Panhandle. Need to keep a very close eye on this, but it does look like the most likely path is going to take it over south central or southeastern Louisiana, which would be a worst case scenario in terms of that storm surge as well. But you can see the European model has a weaker storm initially on approach to western Cuba, keeping it as a tropical storm until it hits the Gulf of Mexico. But we can see that that's already not happening, and that this thing is already likely a hurricane. I mean, look at that convective explosion right over it. You can see the rapid motion. You can see the incredible outflow channel as well. The outflow is going to wrap all the way around in a clockwise configuration way down south as well toward the equator. Big outflow channels with this storm. Acting to ventilate all this convection that's going to blow up over the Gulf of Mexico. And it's also approaching the loop current. The loop current is an area of very warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. Hurricane Katrina experienced a rapid intensification by passing over the warm water of the loop current in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico all the way up to Louisiana. We've already seen those Gulf of Mexico temperatures right up, banked up near the coastline are in excess of 90 degrees, in excess of 32 degrees Celsius. So this thing is going to be gaining strength when it comes ashore up there across southeastern Louisiana. So definitely a worst case scenario appears imminent, and I'm making my final preparations here to get ready to go after this storm. I'm about to leave here. I've still got to get my Mavic Air 2 programmed with my smart controller. I've got to get the Surgeonator sensors. Mark's going to require about 1 to 2 hours to update the firmware on those Surgeonator sensors. I've got the subsonics that are going with me. I've got to pick up a couple more SD cards as well to get that ready to go. And then I'm going to be picking up Mike Scantlin on the way down, and we are going to be chasing this thing together. So now let's take a look at the H-WRF model. Always an exciting one to look at, but man, does the H-WRF do a good job at forecasting the structural evolution of these tropical cyclones. So let me pull this up for you right now here. But really, the forecast is relatively unchanged. In fact, the GFS members are showing a stronger storm now coming up from the into the Gulf of Mexico. Likely going to be a Cat 3, Cat 4 type of a hurricane. when this thing comes ashore. So definitely need to take this as seriously. It's as bad as it can get in terms of dangerous, life-threatening impacts from hurricanes along the north central Gulf Coast. So here is the latest H-WRF model. This is the 6Z run, really showing this thing ramping up when it reaches the central Gulf of Mexico. And there you can see landfall a little bit further west. So interestingly, the H-WRF takes this thing over the Isle of Youth a little bit further east because it's a stronger storm, but then still bends it back to south central Louisiana. There you can see it going over the Isle of Youth, trucking across the central Gulf of Mexico where the bottom really drops out. Look at the structure on that thing, coming in as probably a Cat 4 type hurricane at least. Right over south central Louisiana. Lafayette definitely would sustain significant damage from this. And you can also see those supercells after it makes landfall off to the east side, one of those feeder bands on the east side of the storm. Likely going to be a tornado outbreak with this thing too. Look at those supercells coming in to southeastern Louisiana. Bam, bands of supercells to the east of it. Southern Mississippi, big arc of supercell storms cruising into Alabama. Flash flood potential as this thing goes inland through northern Mississippi, eventually up to western Tennessee. So that's just... That's going to be a big problem. This is going to be one of those hurricanes that we remember for a very long time, like your Hurricane Katrina's, your Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Laura type storms out here. Hurricane Rita, we'll throw that one in there as well. And it's just one of those situations that are about as bad as it gets. And here you can see the upper pattern that's being depicted by the latest GFS. This is the 12Z GFS that's coming in. And you can see that high pressure that's anchored offstream of the Carolinas. And that's going to continue this northwest movement here on the southern periphery of that high. But then as we go forward with time, you're going to see that high pressure start to develop over top the Gulf of Mexico here even, just creating a perfectly ventilated environment here. You can kind of see this anticyclone over the southeastern U.S. Eventually the storm should curve off to the north and then eventually off to the northeast, getting picked up by some of these troughs here. Upstream over the northern plains. Should be a pretty active severe weather pattern across the northern plains. Here you can see one of those troughs there with a relatively consolidated upper jet. And really this high that's anchored over the southeastern U.S., similar to what we saw last year with this subtropical high just dominating the southeastern U.S., causing a lot of these tropical cyclones to form in the Caribbean, or those that form further out into the Atlantic to move due west into the Caribbean, rather than getting these recurving fish storms, as we call them, with that Bermuda high concentrated out over the open Atlantic. And this high pressure here, the southwestern lobe of which also is over the Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to perfectly ventilate this storm here. Very powerful hurricane. Sunday morning, likely going to be a Category 4 at least by this time. Sunday morning, when we're waking up, setting up the surgeonator sensors there along the southern coast of Louisiana. Certainly, maybe get one out down near the Venice area if we can get down there in time and get out before the storm surge gets in there. But it does look like it is going to come in maybe a little bit earlier, possibly as early as Sunday afternoon. There definitely hurricane conditions will start to arrive, maybe as early as even late morning on Sunday. And then that thing comes ashore very near Grand Isle. Striking model agreement with this. A little bit of a trough is going to help to pick this thing off to the north as well. But really it's the steering flow on the western edge of this subtropical high anchored over the southeastern U.S. that's going to turn this storm off to the north. And then we've got Hurricane Nora too. That could make landfall along Baja, California. That's going to infuse a lot of moisture next week into the southwestern U.S., so probably even more flooding across Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Southern California, Southern Nevada, even Western Colorado. With Nora, that's going to make landfall roughly about the same time there across the Baja Peninsula of Mexico. But there you can see Ida continuing to push inland. It's going to bring that tornado threat into southeastern Mississippi, central Mississippi, Alabama, their northeastern quadrant of that storm. It's also going to bring big-time flash flooding with it. 10 to 20 inches of rainfall likely to be dumped here along its path across central eastern Louisiana. And this is just going to truck right along the western edge of this Bermuda high, or this subtropical high, and eventually could even cause major problems with flooding up there in the mid-Atlantic and a tornado potential. But look at this over northern Mississippi there by Monday night. Mike and I are going to try to chase this storm inland here and try to chase that tornado threat across eastern Tennessee, northeastern Alabama, northern Georgia as well. Then another big trough coming in there that's probably going to bring some pretty substantial severe weather with it as well. But this basically becomes a lobe, a vorticity lobe of this big closed low over eastern Canada, and then eventually could cause some big rainfall problems again for the southern Appalachians there. North Carolina, Virginia, upstate South Carolina as well could have some serious problems with flooding out there additionally. And some of the long-range models are showing another hurricane in the Gulf in about 10 days. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well. An interesting high that dominates the central U.S. here. What an interesting pattern here in the long range. But that's really what we're dealing with. Hurricane Ida. It's going to be a major hurricane. It's definitely going to be a major hurricane making landfall south central, southeastern Louisiana. Here is the official National Hurricane Center track. Hurricane watches basically the entire coastline of Louisiana, Sabine Pass, all the way through the coastline of Mississippi as well. And even western Alabama, the west side of Mobile Bay, under those hurricane watches. Because this is a stronger storm, it could trend just a little bit east and take that track over southeastern Louisiana, and that would bring really dangerous conditions as well. Potentially record-breaking storm surge up there along coastal Mississippi and Alabama, Waveland area, Bay St. Louis. Those areas are going to get absolutely hammered by storm surge. Even if this hurricane goes pretty far west over south central Louisiana, it's still going to be a devastating storm surge across Mississippi and Alabama. So I'm getting the surginators ready. I've got the water filters here from Sawyer. I've got some more Flex Seal patches on the Dominator Fore. We've got the subsonic sensors. I got the roof rack installed last night by Sasha and Critter. And also prepping that roof rack for the Dominator weather stations. They're almost ready. Mark is coming down the home stretch on those. But we're going to be focusing on surginator network and subsonic sensors as we deploy on Hurricane Ida. If you live in the central Gulf Coast region, especially in the hurricane watch area, evacuate. Get out of there. Take this thing seriously. If you have a place, I hope that you have a place to go, but get out of those storm surge prone areas. Basically anywhere south of I-10, near and east of the center, is likely going to be underwater within that swampland. So please be careful. And I do expect on this next update for Tropical Storm Ida to be named Hurricane Ida on approach to western Cuba. Hurricane warnings are in effect there in red in western Cuba. Hurricane watches up in the central Gulf Coast. So I'm going to get back to packing up the car. I'm going to hit the road. I'll go live again throughout my journey, 19-hour journey down to the central Gulf Coast. Never stop chasing.